board with the fact that this is not just, to your point earlier, this is not just a technical decision or a technology evaluation. How do you get that alignment internally, or have you seen that dynamic had to overcome before?
Well, and we've seen that. I've seen that type of resistance, right? Even at the executive level, right? Because again, there's a tendency to want to jump right to the software selection. That's a big challenge that we have when we go through these workshops and this digital strategy process. It starts first off with the executive workshops, making sure that we understand the business and the value, and very quickly demonstrating the linkage. And I say that it's important to make sure as quickly as you can to make sure that the executives can see the alignment in the value that a technology may produce out of the process. So that's one. And as the second thing is, as we're going through the process of identifying all the components, to continuously demonstrate the alignment and how, if I've got a strategic requirement or a challenge, how is that impacting or inhibiting a goal that I'm trying to achieve? So you got to make sure that we're continually aligning and continuing. If you're doing all these, if you're compartmentalizing everything and creating silos of information, and you're not linking that back, even at the strategic level, you're going to lose your audience pretty fast, and they won't see the value. But once you're linking it and creating that linkage and alignment, and even to the point where you start at the operational level, tying specific business process back to a strategic goal, and immediately they go, oh, well, so for me to achieve this strategic goal, I've got a business process supporting it, but it's being inhibited by a pain point that's causing us not to be able to perform in a manner that's helping me achieve my goal. If they can see that linkage, then it really helps the process of bringing the executive team over to the point of realizing the value in the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I could see organizations in today's day and age, especially with the world that we're in, where a lot of software vendors are sort of migrating their solutions, their old on-premise solutions, to the cloud. And now they're sunsetting their older solutions, like Microsoft's doing it. They're sunsetting Great Plains and kind of forcing you onto D365, or SAP's doing it with R3 and ECC, forcing you onto S4HANA. And they're all doing it. I don't mean to pick on just SAP or Microsoft. They're all sort of following a similar path to sort of pushing their customers over to the newer systems. It seems like a lot of organizations, as a result of that, are sort of bypassing this whole digital strategy thing, because it's sort of like what you're talking about is the big picture, long-term view. And a lot of them are getting down in the nooks and crannies of, well, I've got to replace my old Microsoft or SAP or ERP system now. So that's my digital strategy. I'm going to replace my legacy system. Do you see that dynamic a lot more nowadays than we saw 10 years ago?
I do. And the mistake that some of the organizations are making is, again, focusing on one problem and one solution. And it's kind of like the more technologies that you have in your portfolio, the greater the chance you're going to break something by introducing something new. So it becomes very important now, if I've got a large organization, and I'm not just saying for a large organization, but if I've got a portfolio of digital solutions that are supporting my business, and I focus on one, you really potentially could break something, right? It's kind of like if I'm doing an upgrade, right? If I'm on an ERP system on an upgrade cycle, right? If you introduce a custom solution, this is the whole point of the cloud, right? Which is to try to eliminate or limit my impact to anything that I've built on that I've custom built. The more chances that you build something custom, more opportunities that you introduce something into the software solution that's going to break something later. So same kind of principle applies here, right? I was going to come back to something that you were focusing on too, and I'm going to come back to it. One of the other areas that we find in the digital strategy transformation that companies are overlooking a little bit more than you would think is not just looking at your company digitally, horizontally, and functionally, but looking at the technology stack. Just recently had a client that they did an excellent job of building their digital strategy long-term. And by the way, they had a lot of divisions. very large portfolio of technologies. So when you saw the picture, it looked like a jigsaw puzzle when I first looked at the picture. And did an excellent job of looking at the software layer of the technology stack. So if at the top, I've got software, then data, then infrastructure. They did an excellent job of a strategy across the top two layers of their technology stack. But they did identify an infrastructure strategy, but they had not done a real examination of their solutions when they started to go down that path of doing a software selection. And what we found was they really overlooked the infrastructure layer, which, by the way, became a very important part of the strategy since they had so many components and they had a longer journey, maybe a 5-year journey, to transform the organization. So you wanted to make sure that you've got a sound foundation to build on from an infrastructure standpoint. If you got to constantly be moving a lot of pieces. So I think one of the areas that, from a digital strategy, the risk area, if you will, is that a lot of corporations need to pay a little bit more attention to their infrastructure and the tools that come along with the migration in and out of the cloud, the migration tools and the support of how you migrate in. All these components become very important as part of that strategy, and that there's some oversight in doing that. And there's also a sense of moving to the cloud is a lot easier than you think. And so I think there's some underestimation of going from on-premise solution to a cloud solution, that somehow we're going to flip a switch and there's going to be some nice integration. I mean, my migration tools will get me there pretty quickly, and we underestimate that process.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's a good way to really think outside the box of just a application. You know, even if you were just implementing an application and moving it to the cloud, there's a lot more to it. You know, as far as data, the integration points, the overall architecture, obviously all the process changes, the change management strategy that you talked about. I mean, that's just a lot of stuff. And you know, what I think is really interesting that you're talking about here is that in most cases, I would say, and tell me if you agree or disagree with this, but it seems like in most cases, it's not, even if a client thinks it's going to be one system, it's going to be one ERP system, a core ERP system that does everything. It's usually not.